The sun stood high over the wild west town of Dry Creek, burning the wooden boards of its porches and the backs of those who lingered too long. Dust spun lazily in the light, the world shimmering like it couldn't decide whether to stay real or drift into a dream. A woman stood near the town's well, her shadow short beneath her, a soft figure in a faded lilac dress that once might have made her feel beautiful. Now it only clung to her body like a memory that no longer fit. Mia wiped the sweat from her brow and kept her head down as two young women passed, their whispers sharp enough to cut through the heat. "Bless her heart, still trying," one said, the other smirking. "Some folks don't know when to stop hoping." Mia's hands trembled against the well's rope. She let it burn against her palms, welcoming the sting. It reminded her she was still here. The sound of boots drew near. Not hurried, not heavy, steady, like someone who didn't have to prove anything. She didn't look up, but she felt it, the way his presence changed the air. Eric stopped a few paces away, the noon sun cutting a hard line across his jaw. His shirt was clean, though the day wasn't kind to clean things. His hands looked used to work, his eyes the color of dry earth after rain. He was 34, unmarried, and to most of the town an enigma. "You're losing water," he said quietly. Mia blinked down, realizing the pail she'd been lowering had tipped sideways, spilling into the dust. Her cheeks flamed. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention." He stepped closer, took the rope from her hands, and pulled the bucket up again. No harm done. Behind them, laughter carried from the saloon porch, low, mean, meant to be heard. Mia froze. She knew that laughter. The same kind that had followed her down the church steps 2 years ago, when her groom never showed. The preacher's son, smooth voice, smooth lies, had called her an angel once. Then he'd ridden away on her wedding morning, leaving her standing before a half-lit altar and a crowd hungry for gossip. She murmured, "You don't have to help me. People talk." Eric met her eyes, calm and unhurried. "They already do." He lifted the full bucket and set it by her feet. Might as well give them something worth talking about. A startled breath escaped her, something almost like laughter, though it cracked halfway. He tipped his hat and walked toward the livery stable without looking back. That evening, Mia sat by her small rented room's window, candlelight painting her notebook gold. She wrote in slow, careful lines. He didn't laugh. Then she closed the book, held it against her chest, and let herself believe, just for a heartbeat, that kindness might still exist in this blistered place. Days passed, then weeks. He returned to town often, always with the same quiet manner. Once he brought her a sack of grain for the sheriff's horses, he said, though she knew he'd bought it himself. Another time, when she tripped over a loose board, he steadied her with one hand, saying nothing, only waiting until she caught her breath. Rumors grew faster than wheat in Dry Creek. "The rancher's gone soft for the fat girl," the barkeep chuckled. "Guess even saints get lonely." Eric ignored it. But Mia heard every word, felt each one like another stone added to the weight she already carried. She tried to stay away, but their paths kept crossing. At the general store, the church steps, the outskirts where the river's edge met his land. One morning, he found her struggling with a wagon wheel that had come loose. He knelt beside her without a word, his fingers rough with work but gentle with purpose. "You always take on things too heavy for one person," he said. "Someone has to," she replied, brushing dust from her skirt. "Life doesn't fix itself." He smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who's been left to fix too much." The words struck something deep in her, something she hadn't dared touch in years. She looked at him, then really looked, and saw not pity but recognition, as though he knew what it meant to carry loneliness like a shadow. The days began to settle into a quiet rhythm. She helped mend fences on his ranch in exchange for eggs and milk. They rarely spoke of themselves, but their silences grew warmer. The land stretched wide around them, golden grass waving under a blue so vast it felt holy. Sometimes he'd hand her a tool without looking up, and their fingers would brush. The world would slow, and for an instant, she could feel every beat of her heart echoing through her chest. One afternoon, as they worked under the sun, she sighed, "You don't have to keep me around just to be kind." Eric looked up, eyes narrowing slightly against the light. You think kindness is all this is? She faltered, unsure. I don't know what else it could be. He set the hammer down, walked toward her until she could see the pulse at his throat. It's respect, he said simply. And maybe something more I haven't found the right words for yet. Before she could answer, the wind rose, sharp and wild. A storm swept in from the east, turning the air electric. Together, they raced to gather the horses, ropes snapping in the gusts. When the last of the herd was safe, the rain broke, thick, sudden, drenching them both. She stood there, soaked and breathless, the fabric of her dress clinging to her frame. I must look ridiculous, she muttered. Eric's voice came quiet, certain. You look alive. The rain fell harder. She turned away, tears lost to the storm. By nightfall, the storm had passed, leaving the world smelling of wet earth and cedar. In the stillness, he spoke, almost a whisper. You're not what they say, Mia. You never were. Her voice shook. And what am I then? The one who stayed when others ran. The next morning, they rode into town together, mud splashing beneath the horses' hooves. The stares began immediately, sharp, assessing, cruel. But Eric didn't flinch. He dismounted and helped her down, his hand steady on her waist. They walked side by side into the churchyard, where Sunday service was ending. The preacher's son stood by the gate, freshly shaven, smirk painted across his face. Well, if it isn't my runaway bride, he said, loud enough for all to hear. Didn't think you'd ever show that face again. Mia froze. The world seemed to tilt, every memory flooding back. The lace dress, the laughter, the shame. Eric stepped forward, voice low but unyielding. You've had your say. Now listen to mine. The man sneered. You gonna defend her honor, rancher? You think you can make her respectable? Eric didn't blink. She doesn't need me to make her anything. She already is. Gasps rose from the crowd. The preacher shifted uneasily on his steps. The sun burned hotter, every sound sharpening. The creak of the signboard, the flap of a loose shutter. Mia's heart pounded, her hands trembling. Eric, please, don't make trouble. It isn't worth it. He turned to her then, eyes steady. It is to me. From his coat pocket, he drew out a small silver ring, simple and worn smooth from years of touch. This was my mother's, he said. She told me to give it to the woman I'd rather grow old with than watch from afar. The preacher's son laughed. You're proposing to her? Eric faced the man, every line of his face unshaken. No, I'm marrying her. Proposing's just a formality. Then he looked back to Mia, voice softening. I don't need a beautiful bride. I need you. The one who stays when everyone else leaves. The one who doesn't quit when life gets cruel. The street had gone silent, as if the whole town was holding its breath. Mia stared at him, disbelief warring with a hope so fierce it frightened her. You can't mean that, she whispered. I've never meant anything more. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't know what you're asking for. He smiled faintly. I do. I'm asking for peace. And you're the only place I've found it. The world seemed to pause then, the dust suspended midair, sunlight turning it to gold. The preacher's son stepped back, suddenly small. Mia's voice trembled. Then I'll stay, for as long as you'll have me. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands rough, trembling just slightly. The church bell began to toll, each note slow and solemn, echoing across the fields. No one cheered, but they didn't need to. The silence itself was sacred. Eric drew her into his arms, the crowd's whispers fading into the hum of the hot afternoon. The town might gossip, the world might never understand, but in that moment, the air was full of something cleaner than mercy. Years later, folks still told the story, how the quiet rancher and the woman they called unlovely taught Dry Creek something about the kind of love that doesn't need permission. And if you listen close, when the sun hangs heavy and the fields shimmer gold, you might still hear it, the echo of that church bell and the promise it carried. Because sometimes the most beautiful thing a man can say isn't I love you, but I choose you, in front of everyone who ever said you weren't enough.